The dream began with a golden mist, swirling around my feet as I stood on the edge of a great chasm. Below me stretched endless clouds, and above, a floating plateau loomed like an island in the sky. Its surface glistened with streams of water that cascaded over the sides, feeding the mist below. I felt an unexplainable pull, as though I belonged there, though I'd never seen it before. Somewhere in the distance, a haunting cry echoed a sound so powerful it seemed to shake the very air. The cry of an eagle, and then silence. I crossed a fragile-looking bridge, its wooden planks creaking underfoot. As I approached the plateau, I noticed figures moving among the waterfall's tall, slender people with flowing robes that shimmered like liquid sunlight. One of them turned and stared directly at me, his gaze piercing yet kind. "You're not of us," he said, his voice like a melody carried by the wind. "But you are bound to us." He gestured toward a towering cascade of water that seemed to hum with life. The memory lies there. Before I could ask what he meant, the figure faded into mist. Beneath the waterfall, I felt the weight of its presence. Its roar was deafening, yet beneath the sound, I sensed whisperers words too ancient to understand. I reached out to touch the water, and it was warm, almost alive. When my hand met the surface, my vision blurred, and I was no longer myself. I touched the water, and it responded with ancient memories. I told the gathered scientists later, recounting every detail. In that moment, the waterfall became a door, pulling me into the heart of the plateau's secrets, a place where reality bent and time unraveled. The memories that flowed into me were vivid yet fragmented snapshots of a civilization older than history. I saw the first settlers arriving on the floating plateau, guided by enormous eagles whose wings seemed to shimmer with starlight. These guardians had led them to the magical waters that never dried, sustaining their lives and binding them to the plateau. But then, the images grew darker. I saw shadows creeping, figures cloaked in smoke, and the eagles falling one by one. The water turned red, and the plateau trembled. My body shivered as the vision ended abruptly. I awoke, or thought I did, lying beside a quiet stream, its water reflecting the soft glow of the plateau's floating lanterns. A boy sat nearby, his back to me, humming a tune that tugged at my memory. When I called out to him, he turned, revealing wide, curious eyes and a face that seemed familiar, though I couldn't place it. "You've seen them, haven't you?" he asked, tilting his head like a bird. "The ones who take the eagles." My throat tightened. "I don't know what I saw," I admitted, and he smiled faintly. "But you will." The boy led me through a forest of glowing trees, their leaves radiating soft blue light. The air was filled with the hum of unseen creatures. "Why am I here?" I asked, but he only looked ahead, his small hand tugging mine gently. At last, we came to a clearing where a massive eagle stood, its feathers streaked with gold and silver. It was majestic, yet its head drooped as though weighed down by sorrow. The boy knelt beside the bird, whispering something I couldn't hear. The eagle's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt an overwhelming sadness. "The water speaks to you, doesn't it?" the boy said, breaking the silence. I nodded, unsure of how to explain the sensations that coursed through me every time I touched it. "The plateau depends on it," he continued, stroking the eagle's feathers. "But it's not just water. It's memory, history, and life itself. Without the eagles, it grows weaker. Without the water, we all fall." His words settled heavily in my chest. "Then why are the eagles disappearing?" I asked, but the boy simply shook his head. "That's why you're here. To find the answer." The eagle spread its wings suddenly, sending a gust of wind that carried the scent of rain and earth. "Follow," the boy said, as the bird took to the sky. I hesitated, unsure if I could keep up. but the boy grabbed my arm and pulled me forward. "You have to trust it," he shouted over the roar of the wind. We ran together, weaving through the glowing forest as the eagle's cry echoed above us. My heart pounded as I struggled to keep the bird in sight, its golden wings like a beacon in the darkening sky. At the edge of the forest, the ground fell away, revealing a vast lake glowing with an inner light. The eagle landed on a jagged rock in the center, its head bowed as though in prayer. "This is where it began," the boy said softly. I knelt by the water's edge, drawn to its brilliance. For a moment, I hesitated, remembering the rush of ancient memories that had overwhelmed me before. But something told me this was different. The boy nodded encouragingly. "You have to see it for yourself," he whispered. My fingers trembled as I reached out. As my hand touched the lake, the light pulsed, and I was submerged in a vision. I saw a time when the waters were pure and endless, sustaining not only the plateau but the lands below. The eagles were not just guardians, they were the keepers of balance, carrying the water's essence to distant realms. But then came the shadowed figures I'd seen before, wielding dark magic that corrupted the flow. The eagles fought valiantly, but fell one by one. I felt their pain as though it were my own, and when the vision ended, I gasped for air. The boy stood beside me, his expression unreadable. "You see now, don't you?" he asked. I nodded, my mind reeling from what I just witnessed. "The water is dying because the balance has been broken," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. The boy looked toward the eagle, who stared back solemnly. "The eagles are the key," he said, "but they can't do it alone. They need someone to guide them, someone who understands the water's memory." I stared at him in disbelief. "You think that's me?" He didn't answer, but his silence was enough. Before I could say more, the ground beneath us began to tremble. The water in the lake rippled violently, and the air grew heavy with an unnatural heat. The eagle let out a piercing cry, taking flight once more. "It's coming," the boy said, his voice trembling for the first time. "What's coming?" I demanded, but he was already running toward the forest. I hesitated, torn between following him and staying by the lake. The water pulsed again, brighter this time, as though trying to warn me of something. I took a step back, heart racing. Shadows began to emerge from the far side of the lake, their forms indistinct but menacing. They moved with an unnatural fluidity, their shapes flickering like flames. The eagle circled above, crying out in warning, but the shadows seemed unbothered. "Run!" The boy's voice echoed from the forest, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. The shadows reached the lake's edge, and the water recoiled, its light dimming. One of the figures stepped forward, and though it had no face, I felt its gaze pierce through me. My chest tightened as I struggled to breathe. The eagle dove suddenly, its talons outstretched, and struck the shadow closest to me. The impact sent a shockwave rippling through the air, and the figure disintegrated into smoke. But more shadows emerged, their numbers growing. The eagle let out another cry, circling protectively above me. "You can't fight them," the boy shouted from the forest. "You have to trust the water." I turned back to the lake, its light now flickering like a dying flame. Desperate, I reached out and plunged both hands into the water, letting its warmth surge through me. As the water enveloped my hands, I felt its strength flow into me. Memories rushed through my mind once more, but this time they were clearer, more focused. I saw the shadowed figures for what they truly were, remnants of a forgotten war, bound by a curse to consume the light. The eagles had fought them before, but their power had waned over centuries. Now it was up to me to bridge the gap, to restore the balance that had been lost. The knowledge burned in my veins, filling me with a purpose I hadn't known before. When I pulled my hands from the lake, the water's light returned, stronger than ever. The shadows recoiled, hissing as the glow spread across the surface. The eagle landed beside me, its eyes filled with a quiet determination. "It's not over," the boy said, emerging from the trees. "This is only the beginning." I looked at him, then back at the lake, and knew he was right. The water had chosen me, and there was no turning back. As the shadows faded into the distance, I stood, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The boy led me deeper into the forest, the air growing heavier with each step. The glowing trees dimmed, their light flickering as if sensing the danger we had just escaped. "You said this is only the beginning," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "What did you mean?" He didn't look at me, his steps quickening. "The water chose you because you're not bound by our rules," he said. "You can go where we can't." I frowned, struggling to make sense of his words. "Where can't you go?" He stopped abruptly and turned to face me. "Beyond the plateau," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes, wide and bright, held a mixture of fear and hope. "The guardians, the eagles, are bound to this place. Their power fades if they leave, but the shadows aren't bound like we are. They've spread to the lands below, poisoning the waters there. That's why the eagles are disappearing. They're being hunted." My stomach churned at the thought. "And you think I can stop it?" I asked. He nodded solemnly. "You're the only one who can. The water's memory is with you now." We emerged from the forest onto a cliff overlooking the vast expanse of clouds surrounding the plateau. The boy pointed to a distant peak that pierced through the mist. "There," he said. "That's where the first eagle fell. The water there is corrupted, and it's spreading. If we can cleanse it, the balance might hold a little longer." I stared at the peak, the enormity of the task sinking in. "How do we get there?" I asked, but the boy simply smiled. "The eagle will take you." My breath caught as I realized what he meant. The great eagle from the lake appeared above us, its wings casting a golden glow over the cliff. It landed gracefully, its massive talons gripping the edge as it lowered its head toward me. "You want me to ride it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The boy nodded, his expression serious. "You have to trust it," he said, echoing his earlier words. My heart raced as I approached the eagle, its feathers glistening like liquid sunlight. I hesitated, but the bird tilted its head, its golden eyes meeting mine. With a deep breath, I climbed onto its back. The eagle's wings beat once, and we were airborne. The wind rushed past me, carrying the scent of rain and earth. I clung to the bird's feathers, my fear melting away as the thrill of flight took over. Below us, the plateau stretched like a living map, its waterfalls shimmering in the light. I could see the glowing forest, the lake, and the jagged peaks that marked the edge of this strange world. But my gaze kept returning to the distant peak the boy had pointed out. It loomed closer with every beat of the eagle's wings. As we flew, I noticed something strange. The clouds below were darker, swirling like a storm brewing beneath the plateau. The eagle let out a low cry, its wings tilting slightly as it adjusted its course. I felt a chill run through me. "What's happening down there?" I whispered, though I knew the eagle couldn't answer. The boy's words echoed in my mind. "The shadows aren't bound like we are." I realized with a sinking feeling that the corruption wasn't just spreading, it was rising. Whatever waited at the peak was only the beginning. We landed on a narrow ledge near the peak, the air heavy with the scent of decay. The eagle lowered its head, allowing me to dismount. I stepped onto the rock, my boots crunching on a layer of ash that covered the ground. The landscape was desolate, the vibrant glow of the plateau replaced by a dull, lifeless gray. Ahead of me, a blackened pool of water bubbled, its surface slick with an oily sheen. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding. The closer I got, the more I could feel the weight of its corruption pressing down on me. Kneeling by the pool, I hesitated. The water here felt wrong, its energy twisted and hostile. But I knew I had to touch it, to understand what had happened. My hand trembled as I reached out, and the moment my fingers met the surface, a jolt of pain shot through me. Images flooded my mind, dark figures dragging an eagle into the pool, its cries echoing as they forced its head beneath the surface. The water consumed the bird's light, turning it into the twisted form I'd seen in the shadows. I gasped, pulling my hand back. The eagle let out a sharp cry, snapping me out of the vision. It stood on the ledge, its wings partially spread as though shielding me from something. I turned to see the shadows emerging from the rocks, their forms shifting and flickering like fire. They moved toward me, their presence suffocating. The eagle stepped forward, its feathers bristling as it prepared to fight. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't your fight." The bird hesitated, its golden eyes locked on mine. I turned back to the pool, my mind racing. There had to be a way to cleanse it. I remembered the lake on the plateau, how its light had surged when I touched it. The water there was alive, connected to the heart of the plateau. If I could channel that energy, maybe I could purify the pool. But how? The eagle cried out again, and I realized the shadows were closing in. Desperation clawed at me as I knelt by the pool, pressing my hands to its surface. I closed my eyes, focusing on the memory of the lake's light, willing it to flow through me. The pool hissed, resisting my touch. The pain was unbearable, but I didn't let go. The water fought back, its energy like shards of glass slicing through me. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to hold on. Slowly, I felt a warmth rising within me, the same warmth I'd felt when I touched the lake. The light began to spread from my hands, pushing back the darkness. The pool bubbled violently, and the shadows let out an ear-piercing screech. I opened my eyes to see the water transforming, its oily surface replaced by a soft glow. The corruption was fading. The shadows recoiled, their forms flickering as though caught in a storm. The eagle let out a triumphant cry, its wings spreading wide as it launched itself at the retreating figures. I watched as it struck them one by one, each impact sending ripples of light through the air. The last of the shadows dissolved into smoke, leaving the ledge eerily silent. The pool now shimmered with a golden light, its surface calm and inviting. I knelt by the edge, exhausted but relieved. The first step was complete, but I knew the battle was far from over. The eagle returned to my side, its feathers glowing brighter than before. It lowered its head, and I placed my hand on its beak, feeling a surge of gratitude from the bird. "We did it," I whispered, though I knew this victory was only temporary. The boy's words echoed in my mind again. "The water's memory is with you now." I looked at the pool, its golden glow reflecting the stars above. The light was stronger here, but I could feel the weight of the task I had pressing down on me. This was only the beginning. As I climbed onto the eagle's back, I glanced back at the pool one last time. Its light pulsed gently, a reminder of what had been restored. But beyond the peak, the clouds were darker than ever, swirling ominously as the corruption spread. The eagle took flight, and I gripped its feathers tightly, my heart heavy with the knowledge that the shadows would return. Below us, the plateau glowed faintly, its waterfalls shimmering like threads of silver. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly overshadowed by the weight of what lay ahead. The eagle carried me back to the glowing forest, where the boy waited. His expression was unreadable as I dismounted, my legs trembling from exhaustion. "You cleansed the pool," he said, his tone flat. I nodded, unsure of what to say. "It's not enough," he added, his voice hardening. The shadows will keep coming until we find their source. I met his gaze, the weight of his words sinking in. Then we'll find it, I said, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. The boy's lips curved into a faint smile. Good. Because time is running out. The forest seemed quieter as we walked back toward the lake, the air thick with unspoken tension. The boy's pace was slower now, his earlier confidence replaced by a somber determination. What happens if we fail? I asked, breaking the silence. He didn't look at me, his gaze fixed ahead. The plateau will fall, he said simply. The words hit me like a blow, the reality of the situation sinking in. And the world below. I pressed. He stopped, turning to face me. They'll fall with it. His eyes were unflinching, and I knew he wasn't exaggerating. The boy led me back to the lake, where the water's glow seemed dimmer than before. The eagle landed nearby, its feathers no longer shining as brightly. I knelt by the shore, placing my hand in the water, hoping to feel the same warmth as before. Instead, the water felt cold, its energy weakened. The corruption is spreading faster than we thought, the boy said, his voice tight with worry. The shadows are drawing power from the source. I looked up at him. Then we need to find it. Now, he nodded, his expression grim. The boy didn't hesitate as he stepped into the lake, motioning for me to follow. The water parted around him as though it recognized him, revealing a hidden path beneath the surface. This will take us to the heart of the plateau, he said, his voice echoing strangely. I hesitated for only a moment before stepping in after him. The water enveloped me, its glow pulsing faintly as we descended. The eagle followed, its massive wings brushing against the shimmering walls of the hidden tunnel. The deeper we went, the darker the glow became, until it was almost gone. We emerged into a vast cavern, the air thick with a suffocating darkness. In the center of the cavern stood a massive pillar of stone, its surface covered in jagged cracks that oozed a black, tar-like substance. The boy stopped, his face pale. "That's it," he whispered. The source. I stepped closer, the weight of the darkness pressing down on me. The pillar seemed alive, its cracks pulsing like veins. I could feel the shadows watching us, their presence hidden but unmistakable. How do we stop it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The boy held out a small vial filled with the glowing water from the lake. "This can purify it," he said, "but it will take everything you have. The water chose you for a reason, and now you must complete what it began." I took the vial, its warmth spreading through my hand. The eagle let out a soft cry, as if urging me forward. I glanced back at the boy. What happens to me if I do this? His eyes were filled with sorrow. "I don't know," he admitted, "but the plateau and the world depend on it." I approached the pillar, the vial clutched tightly in my hand. The darkness seemed to grow heavier with each step, wrapping around me like a suffocating fog. My heart pounded as I reached the base of the pillar, its surface radiating an unnatural cold. I could see the tar-like substance seeping into the ground, spreading its corruption through the plateau. Taking a deep breath, I uncorked the vial and poured the glowing water onto the pillar. The liquid hissed as it touched the stone, and a blinding light erupted, forcing me to shield my eyes. The pillar trembled violently, cracks spreading across its surface as the light fought against the darkness. I felt the water's energy surge through me, connecting me to the plateau itself. Images flashed in my mind, memories of the eagles soaring above the clouds, the waterfalls flowing endlessly, the shadows lurking just out of sight. I realized then that the plateau wasn't just a place. It was alive, its heart beating in rhythm with the waters. The pillar let out a low groan, its form beginning to crumble. But the darkness fought back, lashing out with tendrils of shadow. One of the tendrils struck me, its icy touch sending pain shooting through my body. I cried out, falling to my knees as the shadows began to close in. The eagle let out a fierce cry, diving toward the pillar with its talons outstretched. It struck the stone with all its might, the impact sending a shockwave of light through the cavern. The shadows recoiled, their forms flickering as the eagle continued its assault. I forced myself to stand, clutching the remnants of the vial. There wasn't much water left, but it had to be enough. I poured the remaining water onto the pillar, pressing my hands against its cold surface. I touched the water, and it responded with ancient memories. I whispered, feeling the energy surge through me once more. The light spread from my hands, seeping into the cracks and pushing back the darkness. The shadows let out a deafening screech, their forms dissolving as the light consumed them. The pillar began to collapse, its once imposing form reduced to rubble. I stumbled back, my vision blurring as the cavern was filled with a brilliant, blinding light. When the light faded, the cavern was silent. The pillar was gone, and in its place stood a pool of crystal clear water, its surface shimmering like a star-filled sky. The eagle landed beside me, its feathers glowing brighter than ever. The boy approached, his expression a mixture of relief and awe. "You did it," he said, his voice trembling. "The source is cleansed." I nodded, too exhausted to speak. The weight of the darkness was gone, replaced by a sense of peace that radiated through the cavern. But something felt different, something within me had changed. As I knelt by the pool, I saw my reflection for the first time since entering the plateau. My eyes glowed faintly, the same light that had pulsed through the water, now shining within me. The boy knelt beside me, his gaze searching mine. "You're connected to the plateau now," he said softly. "Its life flows through you." I didn't know what to say. The weight of the responsibility was overwhelming, but I also felt a strange sense of purpose. The plateau was alive, and its survival was tied to mine. The eagle nudged me gently, urging me to stand. The boy smiled faintly. "There's one more thing," he said, leading me back toward the hidden tunnel. As we ascended, the glow of the water grew brighter, illuminating the path ahead. When we emerged onto the plateau, the sight before me took my breath away. The waterfalls flowed with renewed energy, their light cascading into the clouds below. The air was alive with the sound of eagles crying out, their forms soaring above us in a dazzling display. The plateau was healing, its balance restored. The boy turned to me, his expression serious once more. "The shadows may return," he said. "Their source is gone, but their influence lingers. The world below still suffers from their corruption." I met his gaze, the weight of his words sinking in. "Then I'll do what I can," I said, my voice steady despite the uncertainty I felt. The eagle let out a soft cry, lowering its head to me. I placed my hand on its beak, feeling a surge of warmth and understanding. Together, we had saved the plateau, but our journey was far from over. As the boy walked away, I stood on the edge of the plateau, looking out at the world below. The clouds had begun to clear, revealing glimpses of the lands beyond. For the first time, I could see the rivers and forests that stretched to the horizon. But I also saw the scars left by the shadows, the dark patches where life had been drained away. The eagle stood beside me, its golden eyes fixed on the horizon. "This is just the beginning," I whispered, feeling the water's memory stir within me once more. The boy returned, carrying a small, glowing orb of water. "This will help you," he said, handing it to me. "It contains the memory of the plateau's heart. Use it wisely." I held the orb, its light pulsing softly in my hand. The eagle lowered itself, allowing me to climb onto its back. "Where will you go?" the boy asked, his voice tinged with hope. I looked at him, then back at the horizon. Wherever the shadows have touched, I said, it's time to bring the light back to the world below. The eagle took flight, carrying me toward the horizon. The wind rushed past me, carrying the scent of renewal and possibility. Below us, the plateau glowed with life, its waterfalls shining like beacons in the darkened world. The orb in my hand pulsed with warmth, a reminder of the task ahead. As we soared above the clouds, I felt a sense of determination settle within me. The plateau had been saved, but the fight was far from over. The shadows had touched more than this one place, and I was the only one who could stop them. I closed my eyes, letting the water's memory guide me. The world below stretched out before me, a canvas of beauty and pain. The eagle's wings beat steadily, carrying us toward the unknown. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I felt a deep connection to the life around me, a connection that gave me strength. I touched the water, and it responded with ancient memories. I whispered again, the words of promise to the world and to myself. The light would return, and the balance would be restored. This was only the beginning of the journey.